Hello and welcome to today's webinar. My name is Helen Hall and I'm one of IEEE USA's webinar coordinators. The webinar team will be adding new webinars to the schedule throughout the year, so please continue to visit our website to register. And I'd like to ask that participants press *6 to mute their lines so that we won't have any background noises on our recording. I'm to turn it over to Philip now. He's going to introduce the SBA presenters.
Good afternoon, all. Hi, my name is Philip Gibson. I'm here with U.S. Small Business Administration. I have 3 people from the SBIC program, started with Jeff Finkelman, Ellen Kim, and also Awardees. Mr. Finkelman will give you a little bit about a little bit of information about himself. Ms. Kim will do the same, and Mr. Awardees will do the same too. Start off with Mr. Finkelman.
Hey, thanks, Philip. My name is Jeff Finkelman. I'm a financial analyst with the Office of Program Development in the SBIC program, and I've been here with the SBA for about a year. I'm working in the Office of Program Development.
Hi, my name is Ellen Kim. I'm a senior advisor within the Office of Investment. Prior to this, I've had work experience with startups in the financial sector, as well as with management consulting. Working on a broad array of initiatives within the Office of Investment.
Hi, my name is Dason Wardak. I also work in the Office of Investment with the SBIR program. And previous to the Small Business Administration, worked with Down Hamilton in IT strategy. And previous to that, was an entrepreneur myself.
Thanks, Dason. This is Jack Bianco, also from the Office of Entrepreneurship Education here at headquarters, and we want to thank everybody for joining us. I want to take one quick second to introduce Winslow Sargent, who is our Chief Advocate here at the SBA and a longtime friend of IEEE.
Hi, this is Winslow Sargent. It's a pleasure to be on the call. As John said, I am Chief Counsel for Advocacy. I've also been an SBIR program manager, and I've served on the board of IEEE, both on the History Center and also the foundation itself, so it's good to be here.
Great. So this is Ellen Kim. So I want to thank the IEEE for giving us this opportunity to share a little bit about the programs within the Office of Investment. Again, we focus on a broad array of initiatives for high-growth entrepreneurs, which I'm familiar that a lot of the IEE members are a part of that group. We'll focus mostly on our cornerstone programs, which are the SBIC, the Small Business Investment Company program, and then the Small Business Innovation Research program. But I think first I'd just like to set the context for what our office does, where we focus in the market, and why we focus there. So we focus here in the Office of Investment on high-growth companies, really with the sort of the thought process that job creation is coming from small businesses. So Kauffman Foundation has done several studies that have shown that 2 out of every 3 net new jobs come from small businesses. And we found that a disproportionately high number of those jobs are coming from a subsegment called gazelles. So gazelles have been defined across an array of research studies that show anything from growth year over year, 20% for 4 years. But any way you slice it, these gazelles, these high-growth small businesses, are disproportionately contributing to job creation. And the gazelles are going to look slightly different than your Main Street small businesses. So with respect to that, for 90% of the job creation is coming from these high-growth businesses. So on slide 3 shows a little bit of, again, why we're focusing on high-growth small businesses. So as small businesses move down the growth continuum and move down the funding path, there are opportunities within pre-seed and seed stage for friends and family rounds, angel rounds. But as the down economy has taken grasp over the last couple of years, venture capital has really moved upstream, and it's funding now in increments of $4 million and greater. So there's this very wide funding gap between the $1.5 and the $4 million range. So that's where we put a lot of our focus. That's where our SBIR and SBIC programs come into play and can really help fill that gap, not only with respect to investment size, but also with respect to geographic disbursement as we play in both programs across all 50 states. And then lastly, just with respect to how our office fits in within the SBA at large, so we really talk about our resources and our services across 3 Cs. We call that capital, contracting, and counseling. So across Main Street, many of you may be familiar with our loan programs, our 7A, our 504, which have really been boosted with the recent Small Business Jobs Act. Across contracting, we have an entire Office of Government Contracting and Business Development. They're focusing on everything from making sure that the different agencies are held accountable to the 23% rule, and really encouraging each agency to really take advantage of as many small business contractors across the country as possible. And then in our Office of Entrepreneurial Development, putting on everything from webinars such as this to making sure that the small business development centers are of service to entrepreneurs, and our SCORE network really has the proper mentors and reach. And so within this program, again, within the Office of Investment, focusing on those same 3 Cs, but targeting what we do to high-growth entrepreneurs. So in capital, we have this SBIC program. I mean, Jeff will speak to this a little bit, but we had a record year in fiscal year 2010, deploying more capital than we have in the debenture program over the past 50 years. And then with respect to contracting, the SBIR program, we've initiated a new program called SBIR 2.0, which is just an initiative to streamline and simplify processes, make sure that everything is more entrepreneur-friendly and more conducive to entrepreneurs who are trying to enter into government work. And then across counseling, we have several new initiatives. Nothing has been launched formally, but looking at opportunities to mentor high-growth entrepreneurs, again, there with the thought that the services and the resources that they need are slightly different than Main Street small business. So with that said, I'll turn it over to my colleague, Jeff, who will talk specifically about the Small Business Investment Company Program.
Great. Thanks, Ellen. So the presentation that I'm going to make here is really a broad overview of the Small Business Investment Company Program. And much of the information is targeted really towards the private equity funds that we work with, rather than the small businesses themselves that ultimately get the funding. So there's 3 components of this presentation. The first is just sort of a general overview of our program, how it works, and the basic results that we've had. The second component is to look at the life cycle of a small business investment company, how they come into the program, and ultimately how they're monitored. And then finally, the third component will look at the program performance, highlighting especially the performance that we've had in fiscal year 2010. So this graphic here basically gives you the overview of how the program works. Essentially, you can think of the SBIC program as a government-sponsored fund of funds. The way we work is that we essentially provide capital to private equity funds that are going to be investing in small businesses. For every dollar that a private equity fund can raise from private investors, the SBA will essentially provide $2, up to a cap of $150 million. As a result, these private equity funds are able to raise money much more quickly than they would otherwise, and it allows capital to go to small businesses that might not otherwise be a target for these private equity funds. So in fiscal year 2010, the SBA issued $1.17 billion in new commitments to SBICs. Just about $2 billion of financing went to 1,331 small businesses, 29% of which were into low to moderate income areas or in minority or women-owned businesses. And as a result, an estimated 46,130 jobs were created, and maybe the best part of the program is that this is all done at zero cost to the taxpayers. So just to go through the SBIC life cycle, I'm just going to talk briefly about essentially what kind of funding we provide to private equity firms, the criteria that we impose on the private equity funds in terms of their investments, and then the 3 phases of the application or of the life cycle that SBICs go through. So to begin with, the SBA actually doesn't provide equity capital to private equity funds. We provide debt. So we're essentially loaning money to the private equity firms. And this is relevant because it shapes the types of investments that these funds ultimately make in businesses. So we have 2 products. One is the regular debenture, which is by far the most popular product that we offer. This is a 10-year instrument. It has semi-annual coupon payments. with a bullet payment at maturity. The interest rate for this semi-annual payments is basically a couple points spread over the 10-year Treasury note. So it's very low-cost capital, and it's very attractive for the funds to participate. And for the regular debenture, the only criteria is that these funds invest in small businesses. The second type is the discounted debenture, and really the main difference with this is that it's a discounted note, and the funds that use this are required to invest in small businesses that are in low to moderate income areas only, or energy-saving products or services. When a fund gets funding from the SBA, this slide shows you the criteria that their investments have to fit. They can invest using loans, debt with equity or equity, but they can't put more than 10% of the proposed total fund size in one investment. They have to invest in the United States. The size of the investment has to meet our definition of a small business, which is less than $18 million of tangible net worth, and an after-tax income for the prior 2 years of less than $6 million. SBICs can have control of these businesses, but the use of proceeds cannot be used for project finance transactions, real estate transactions, nor can it go to financial intermediaries. So those are some of the basic criteria that we ask our SBICs to follow. I'll run through this pretty quickly because it's mostly relevant for funds that apply, but basically there's three components to the process of becoming an SBIC. The first is the application process, which is where my office comes in, the Office of Program Development. We evaluate the applications from private equity funds to determine that they have the adequate qualifications to properly manage the fund and to protect the taxpayers' interests. The second part, once they get past the application, is they have to raise money from private investors. We require that SBICs raise at least enough funding to be viable. And the minimum that we set is $5 million of private capital, though more often than not, it's going to be much more than that. And once they do that, they submit a final application and they'll be approved for a license. The final phase is portfolio monitoring. We have an office that monitors these funds over the life of the fund and deals with any issues that may come along during that generally 10-year period. So to finish, just wanted to look at the program performance for the SBIC program, particularly in this last fiscal year. Or I should say we're going to look briefly, I guess, here at the portfolio itself. This is a breakdown of the capital, the types of instruments that our SBICs are using. You'll see that a lot of it is debt, and as I mentioned before, that has to do with the fact that our capital that we provide is debt. These SBICs have to earn current income on their investments in order to support the debt that we provide. So a lot of their investments are going to take the shape of debt as opposed to equity. The industry, I guess, distribution is pretty diverse. You'll see in this graph that there's really no major standout here, maybe other than manufacturing, but it's pretty widely dispersed across manufacturing, business services, consumer-related industries. You're not going to see a lot of early-stage sort of technology companies in this portfolio. It's going to be more of these later-stage, businesses in these industries. Finally, the geographic profile of the program. You can see it's heavily weighted on the east and northeast, but we do have funds across the country. And we're always excited when a fund comes in that wants to make investments, certainly in the Midwest, mountain area, or Southwest. We don't see a lot of those funds, but we're always eager to see more. So to the record growth, you'll see here that in fiscal year 2010, or I should say the profile for fiscal year 2010 is very different from the average for the past several fiscal years. We've made far more commitments to new SBICs in the last fiscal year. The financing to small businesses has gone up considerably in the last fiscal year, and the initial capital to new funds has also gone up. It's really a record year for the program, and we really only anticipate further growth as we go into 2011. Part of the driver for this growth, I think, or at least the way that the SBA has managed to meet the challenge of growing interest in the program, is that we've issued more licenses, so we're open to new funds, and we've reduced the processing time. So when a fund comes to us, because of increased operational efficiency, we've been able to manage the inflow of applications and reduce the time that funds spend with us before they get licensed. So finally, this is just some contact information. I'm sure at the end we can go over that as well. If there's any questions, Christy Craig, my boss in the Office of Program Development, is always ready to answer questions as well as myself. So I guess I'll pass it on for the SBIR program.
Okay, so we'll go into talking about the SBIR and STTR programs. We'll start out by doing a little bit of an overview of the program and a little bit of policy, and then we'll go into the particular structure and a little bit of advice on how to seek funding from within the program. So this program is a little generally speaking, this program is a little different than the SBIC program because agencies within the SBIR program are directly giving money to entrepreneurs and small businesses. So generally speaking, the goal is to support, for the SBIR and STTR programs, is to support the scientific excellence and technological innovation through federal funding to build a strong national economy related to federal research needs through small business. So 4 main goals of the program since its inception: meeting federal research and development needs, increasing private sector commercialization, stimulating innovation, and encouraging the participation of women and minorities in the program. So the history is that this started as a small program at the NSF as a kind of sort of a pilot program in the late 1970s. One of the very first companies to get an SBIR award at the NSF was what you now know today as Symantec. So it's kind of a good side story. And 3 legislative acts since then have kind of renewed the program, and currently we're operating in a continuing resolution up until the end of the month. We fully expect that we'll have a renewed resolution to continue the program, but I just want to keep everyone aware of that. We don't have a long-term reauthorization at this point. So there are 2 programs, and they have slight differences. One is the SBIR program, which is much bigger, probably a magnitude bigger than the STTR program. The SBIR program is a set-aside for small businesses or with federal research and development funding, and it's 2.5% of all agencies with greater than $100 million in extramural research budget. And extramural in that context really means the research budget that's going outside of the government, being given in a variety of contexts to big businesses, small businesses, universities, and research institutions. And then the STTR program, it encourages a partnership between the small business with U.S. research institutions. Most of the time, those research institutions are going to be universities. And that's 0.3% of the extramural research budget for all agencies with an extramural research budget greater than $1 billion per year. So in the SBIR program, as you'll see a little later, we have 11 agencies. In the STTR program, we have 5 of those 11 agencies involved. So general structure, it's a 3-phase structure that kind of simplifies how innovation really works, but within government we try to make it a little bit more linear and make it simpler to understand. So phase 1 is usually a feasibility study or a prototype of whatever technology you're going to build or try to produce. Usually the maximum is $150K and the period of performance is going to be 6 months. Some agencies give out as low as $75K. $75,000 during that 6 months, some as high as $150,000. And some also have matching programs during the phase 1 that will match outside funding that you get during that time. Phase 2 is for a more fuller research and development effort that will take you towards a product or technology that you can produce to sell. And the maximum of that funding will be $750,000, and that period of performance could be as long as 24 months. And then finally, so those 2 phases actually use SBIR funding. Finally, you have a commercialization stage where you are getting funding outside of the SBIR program. It does not mean that you're not going to get federal funding. It just means that you're not going to get it from this amount of funding that's set aside for the SBIR program. So oftentimes, most notably within the DoD and NASA, you could find yourself getting follow-on contracts with the government to produce that technology for federal needs. So basic eligibility criteria: you have to be a for-profit business. You have to have 500 employees or less, which is our basic definition of a small business at the federal level. The PI's primary employment must be with a small business. So you can't typically, you don't want PIs that are doing 5 different things at one time. They should be primarily engaged with the business. And 51% should be owned by individuals. So sometimes that takes out venture-backed businesses where the professional investors have taken over 50% of the equity in the firm. With STTR, it's all of those things, kind of all of those things that we talked about, but slight differences here are the applicant is once again a for-profit small business, but there has to be a formal cooperative research and development agreement with the research institution. And like I said, usually that's the university. And you can see the minimums for where the funding should go with respect to the small business and that research institution. And there has to be an intellectual property agreement. Obviously, at universities, this tends to many of you may know from on the phone, but this is something that when you apply, these things should, not necessarily when you apply, these things should be in place, but when you are awarded, these things should be in place. Now how do I go backwards? What do I do? All right, thank you. I had some cheesy animation I was trying to get past. So the standard phase 1 process, so where most of you would be starting from scratch, we have solicitation topics that are put out roughly 2 to 3 times per year per the 11 agencies. It's not a rolling admissions process or they are fixed times, and they all come in at once, and they all get reviewed at once during these 2 to 3 windows per year. Unsolicited proposals are not accepted, and last year there were about 2,300 different solicitation topics across the 11 agencies. So definitely there's an opportunity probably to get the research or technology ideas that you have into a proposal. Usually they're about 25 pages. It requires some work to do them. And you can see the rough evaluation criteria there, and those kind of vary slightly throughout the agencies, and that leads to a phase 1 award. The key thing to remember is that this whole process will probably take you 6 to 9 months, and it's something to keep in the back of your mind as you apply for this process as an entrepreneur and doing your financial planning in your small business, that you may not hear back for a while. So that's basic structure of the program. I want to go into who the participating agencies are, how big they are within the program, and a little bit of advice that we've kind of compiled, generally speaking, from participants. So this is kind of a good rough understanding of the size of the program. Don't hold me to these numbers. These numbers change year over year as the research budgets increase or decrease every year. But roughly what you're seeing is that the Department of Defense is going to be over half of the program, and the whole program, SBIR and STTR combined, are about $2.5 billion. Some surprises that you may see that you wouldn't expect to be participating in the program is the Department of Education, the Department of Transportation also give out SBIR funds. So this slide has a lot to do with the differences between the agencies. So they're not necessarily all equal. I talked a little bit about solicitations and the different windows of timing, topic areas. At a place like NSF, the topic areas are quite broad because they're not going to end up procuring what you may build as an SBIR company, whereas at a place like the Department of Defense and NASA, those topics may be narrow because it's something that they want to acquire in the short term. Proposal logistics, there's no one unified process. This is probably, admittedly, a weakness of the program. So there are 11 different agencies. You have to serve probably 11 different agency sites to actually get to the solicitation topic and apply with respect to that agency. Success rates generally vary within the program, but I think a good ballpark estimate is a phase 1 will win probably at a minimum like 15%. It was probably the lowest success rate, up to 40%, and the phase 2 is probably similar. So to put in a different perspective of all those folks applying for a phase 1, about 5 to 15% will actually end up with a phase 2. Of all the phase 1 applicants, 5 to 15% will end up completing the phase 2. Couple other logistics with respect to the award. There are contracts, which are very tightly managed, and there are grants, which we'll go into a little bit. Financial details about indirect and direct cost rates and limitations with respect to that, and the dollar amount of the award, which I alluded to at the beginning. The next slide has to do with describing the differences between a contracting agency and a granting agency, and you kind of see the categories below. I guess probably the one agency that deals with contracts and grants is the Department of Health and Human Services at the National Institutes of Health. But otherwise, these differences are kind of plain and easy to see. As a grant, you're going to have a lot more flexibility. As a contractor, you're not, but you're potentially going to an agency that might procure or acquire your technology and follow on contracts. Finally, some basic answers to some frequently asked questions. No, you do not have to have a PhD to apply or a medical doctorate degree. A lot of people have that perception of the program. I think a lot of successful awards come from those that don't necessarily have those terminal degrees in their field, but just have a great understanding of their project scientifically and technically. You may submit similar applications to different agencies, but you may only accept one of those awards. And that's really important. So no duplicative work. And the other two are kind of self-explanatory. So some collected advice from awardees. Don't judge an agency's interest by its name. I think that's very, very important. There are many, many agencies that may seem, for example, with robotics, we found that there are 50 different robotics topics across 5 to 7 different agencies, where you might not think that a place like the U.S. Department of Agriculture might be involved in robotics technology. So I would also advocate that you should get to know your agency's program manager. So if you are going to zero in on a particular topic that you want to apply for during a solicitation window, contact the program manager and see if you can have further discussions about that. Some agencies you may not be able to if it's a contract, but some agencies, they may be very open to understanding what you're trying to do and give you advice on whether or not to apply for the program. Other related advice, don't depend solely on SBIR funding. I think that's pretty key. $100,000 in 6 months is probably not going to get you a long way and get you to a big company. So please look for outside funding while you're in the program, or see the SBIR program as one element of getting funding for your startup or your small business. And I think in the end, first-time applicants don't have a high success rate, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't apply a couple of times before you get it right. And especially if you're in a position not to seek that funding urgently, I think the SBIR program could be a great place to grow your business. And with that, I will close out and turn it over to Jack.
Great. Thanks, Asan. And Helen, I think you're going to